It's 11:34. We'll return to vaccine-related territory as and when the news demands. I suspect Sheila and Eddie will be also exploring some of the attendant issues in the course of their programmes later today. But I want to move next to the story that does actually dominate the front pages. It's so weird, isn't it? You've still got people claiming it's going to be brilliant, and at the same time, you've got people arguing over who's going to be to blame for it. As a general rule, write this down, children, as a general rule, you don't blame people for brilliant things. But they're already trying to blame various people for Brexit, even people that supported Brexit. My favourite is the idea that it's all Remainers' fault, that it's all going to be so awful. That's why I mentioned the last leader of the Labour Party just before the news, because, of course, people who pointed out that Jeremy Corbyn was unelectable are to blame for the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was unelectable. Therefore, I am not surprised, I may even have predicted it, that people who pointed out that Brexit was a rubbish idea are going to be responsible for the fact that Brexit was a rubbish idea. But these are conversations for books yet to be written. I want to turn your attention next to two things, IDK, and as Mark in Provence rather winningly pointed out, you could at this point bring in IDS, i.e. people who do not know their proverbial backside from their elbow when it comes to what Brexit would actually mean. IDS being one of the most prominent proponents of that worldview, despite obviously still thinking he's a genius. David Davis, Digby Jones, I don't know who your favourites would be, Andrew Bridgen, Mark Francois. Nigel Farage has disappeared. He's shouting at cyclists now, which kind of makes sense. I need to apologise to Nigel Farage. I suggested last week that so predictable and pathetic is his modus operandi that he would soon be screaming about cycle lanes. It was pointed out to me just before I got off air by you, although I didn't have time to correct it on the day. He was already screaming at cycle lanes when I made that prediction stroke projection. So my apologies to Big Nige for suggesting he was about to do something pathetic when he had actually already done it. Just always good to clear that up. May our Culpa. A lot of people loving that DIY SOS analogy, I have to say, and my goodness me, it was a cracker. That's why we wheeled out the round of applause, even though it's only Tuesday. On what day will Boris Johnson travel to Brussels? It's taken him 1,629 days after the Brexit vote. Talks are still deadlocked because obviously you can't have your cake and eat it. And now Boris Johnson is going to head to Brussels this week in a last-ditch bid to save the Brexit talk. So phone lines are open. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And the question is as broad and as big as it could possibly be at this point in proceedings. What do you think is going on? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Actually, we need to clear the board. We're not taking any more calls on vaccines. So let's clear this switchboard and we'll start taking calls now on what do you think is going on. So I'll run you through the possibilities. They've already agreed something, which would involve quite a big climb down for Boris Johnson. And this is an attempt to make it look like last-minute brinksmanship, and the photo opportunity is not to be underestimated, standing together on the steps of wherever they stand and announcing the deal in a kind of outbreak of concord and solidarity. So that's option number one, is that he's already buckled and is going out for a photo op. I just don't believe... Actually, no, carry on. So that's option one. Option two is that Boris Johnson's epic diplomatic and negotiating skills will be deployed to secure something that currently feels out of reach. So you might say that is Johnson is about to play a blinder. And remember, you can add to this list or you can put a tick next to one of these theories. Hopefully by the time I've worked out all my possible theories, I'll have a favourite and I'll be able to suggest which one I think it is. Number three, it's all over bar the shouting. No deal is, as ever, the only way to avoid having to actually describe Brexit and therefore make it clear that under no possible reading of reality could 52% of an electorate having voted for it, because the person who voted for that Brexit and the person who voted for that Brexit voted for two completely different things. So the minute you write it down, the mandate disappears. That's been clear since... Oh, God, this is going to be the hardest one. Do you know what? I might just put a tenner in the box immediately. if that's all right. I'm going to be raising money, and not to you, Keith. It goes to charity. I have alluded to the fact that I'm involved in some end of life care at the moment, and I think the hospice movement. I'm going to get a bit emotional now, so bear with me. All right, the people that come into the homes of patients who are dying, in this case with cancer, are. I do not have the words to begin to describe how incredible these people are and the things that they do. And can I tell you something? We suggested to one of them that it was an absolute travesty that they didn't get paid more. And do you know what she said? She said, well, if we got paid more money, it might attract the wrong sort of people. It might attract people that were only doing it for the money. And I had to leave the room and have a little bit of a sob in the toilet at that point. Because I just thought, what do you say to somebody who is swimming so powerfully against the tide of materialism and whatever other word you want to inject at this point? It just blew me away. So that is... Now I'm going to have to say the words, aren't I? So that I can put some money in the pot, having described the pot in such powerful terms. So I've already given 100 quid to this charity, so I could have 10 for free, couldn't I? Or do I have to start from scratch? I can't retrospectively. All right, well, let me double check on exactly what the charity is that we gave to last night, and then I will fill my boots, because it was so much of this was clear, especially the bit I've just said about if you have to write it down, the mandate disappears. The minute you write it down, Brexit falls apart. So that would suggest to me that Boris Johnson knows this. His survival hinges upon not writing it down, because the minute you write it down, you disappoint them or them or them or them or them or them or them. It was always the case that Remain was one thing and Leave was 100 different things, which is why the whole referendum was such a stupid idea. So what's he up to? Theory number 3, he goes to Brussels so he can say, look, folks, I folks, did everything I can, folks, ruffle hair, shake head, alas, quote Homer. Look, folks, cogito ergo sum, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori, quaderat demonstrandum, Amo massa mamartis amant. I've done everything I possibly can, but you know these pesky Euros are great. That just not. So that would be option number 3. It's all over, but he goes to Brussels so that he can portray himself as having tried at the last minute to secure some sort of deal before reality starts to kick our collective heads in on January the 1st. I shouldn't have done that quite so loudly. I've got a tickly throat now. Just give me a second. Oh, that's better. So option number 1, he's rolled over and he's going out for the photo opportunity. Option number 2, he really is going to bring some previously unheard of skills to the table in the context of diplomacy and negotiation and wrestle something worth having from the fire. Number 3, it's all over. It's no deal. And this is just an opportunity to let him claim that he did everything he possibly could. I strained every sinew. I'm going to give myself a cough again. I strained every sinew, folks. I absolutely et propter hic ergo Virgil. Option number 3. Option number 4. Have we got any others? This is where you come in. There's 2 phone lines free at the moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What the F is going on, right, Henry, who's just tuned in? I just had a world exclusive with the Prime Minister. Option number 4? Have we got an option number 4 on this? I mean, what is going on now? Because I guess the saddest element of the whole debate is the fact that they've already trying to work out who to blame before they've admitted that it's rubbish. So I don't know if you've seen this. And people I get on with in other areas of politics claiming that Remainers somehow are responsible for Brexit being rubbish because it could have all gone differently, which you can just about sustain as an argument if you forget about the red lines and freedom of movement. How many times did we? That's close, isn't it? How many times did we speak of blame? How many times did we say that when it when push comes to shove, they'll blame everybody except themselves. And here we are. And Boris Johnson is very much of that number, isn't he? He's very much in that gang. So what do you think is going on? What's the trip to Brussels all about? I've given you 3 options. I'll stop now because I want you to introduce your own options. And I'd rather they were first-hand, I think, as in what you genuinely think is going on, rather than speculations. 11:44 is the time. I'll take this up to 1:45, and then we'll start with the calls immediately afterwards. Gareth in Benidorm will be up first. Colin in Belton in North Lincolnshire after him. Haven't had enough female voices today on the programme, so do feel free to contribute from that side of the story. What do you think is going on? Boris Johnson is heading to Brussels this week in a last-ditch bid to save the Brexit talks. Is it already done and dusted, and he has rolled over on the level playing field? He'll offer up fish as a sort of red herring. See what I did there? And he's there for the photo opportunity. Is he going to deploy previously unsuspected skills of diplomacy and negotiation in order to actually achieve something that hasn't yet been considered possible? Or is he simply using it as an opportunity to claim that he did everything he could to secure a deal, but the pesky Euros wouldn't let him? 0345 6060 973. And you're right, I don't think Rory Bremner has got anything to worry about from me. It is 10 to 12, and it was weird yesterday, wasn't it? It was like Groundhog Day taking calls on the subject of Brexit, although, of course, the tragedy was that some pendulums haven't swung at all. The bigger pendulums have swung. People are already deciding who's going to get the blame for it being awful, and people who explained why it would be awful are inevitably perhaps at the front of the queue. So what do you think he's doing in Brussels this week? Gareth is in Benidorm. Gareth, what can you tell us?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
I've spoken to you before. I was a Remainer with Veterans for Europe.
Yes.
And now, after it's all over, the people here in Spain, the people who call themselves expats, who are really immigrants like me, they are the ones who are moaning the most now. For example,
you've launched your own phone-in, which is absolutely your prerogative. It's your show as much as mine, Gareth, but you're not necessarily going to have a swing at what Boris Johnson is playing at this week. You're simply giving us an update on how...
Yes, no, but it is relevant to that, because
okay.
What I'm saying is he's got to speak to the people here as much as anybody else, the Leavers,
yes.
who are all moaning about... and he's got to show that he's actually right down to the line. He's been... on their side and trying to do the best for them and all the rest of it. He's going to have to make concessions.
Well, is that a big enough constituency for him to worry about?
Well, it's the constituency that matches the people who are moaning about Brexit, who are the Brexiters in England, isn't it, really? Because they're not getting what they wanted.
So he insulates himself from their criticism by turning up in Brussels saying, I've done absolutely everything possible,
exactly,
but I still couldn't do it, folks. Cogito ergo sum. And then...
Yes, exactly. And my theory is, my observation is that the people who were the Remainers are now much more adjusted to the leaving process than the people who were the Leavers.
Yes, of course.
Because we've all got our Spanish driving licenses here. They haven't. They're all saying, oh, my God, we've got to change over to Spanish licenses. What's wrong with a good old British driving licence, eh?
Yeah, Project Fear, mate.
Well, it's just Barnier being spiteful because he doesn't like Brexit. That's why they've got to get Spanish driving licences and this kind of stuff. So I think Johnson has to appeal now to the people who supported his Brexit and say, look, it really is something that they've messed up in Europe, and we did our best. They didn't want us to leave, and they've messed it up for us.
So that's option.
What he's going to say.
That's option 3. You're going for option 3. I'm here in Brussels, folks, to demonstrate that I've done my absolute best for you, dulce et decorum est. But but they wouldn't let me. Those pesky froggies, or whatever it's going to be.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to struggle to argue with you. You know that, but I should at least try. Don't laugh. This is
Well, I'm laughing because I had a conversation with a Brexiter here,
yes,
just earlier, a couple of days ago, and he was absolutely fuming about having to get all these papers changed. We've had notices from the British Embassy in Madrid, and people are just sort of waking up to it now. The people who are below the radar, who've never been involved with Spanish paperwork, they're the people who are suffering now. I mean, I'm getting my Spanish passport shortly. I hope I'm waiting for it to come through.
Who do you think they will blame? Who do you think they will blame?
They'll blame the Remainers.
How will that be?
I daren't drink in an English pub here anymore because the feelings are so high amongst the Leavers.
And how in their own minds would it be your fault that they've punched themselves in the face?
Because if we hadn't, this is what they think. If we hadn't fought against Brexit with all our campaigning, the demonstrations, I was flying over to London, talking to people here about how bad it was going to be for British immigrants here and so on, and they now blame us because if it had all gone their way without us resisting Brexit, then it would have been straightforward. That's basically their point of view.
And then you say, explain that to me, and
that position for their disappointment.
So you say, just explain their reasoning behind that to me, and they empty a jug of sangria over your head, because that's that. I mean, it's the old Brexit. It's the same Brexit conversation as all of them.
It turns to anger very quickly.
Yeah, so just ask for an explanation or evidence.
Actually, I was threatened with violence just for saying what makes you think that it's going to be so much better now.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't like British pubs anymore anyway.
No.
But I wouldn't go in one now because it's too dangerous.
And how many? Because you're known for your advocacy for
exactly. Yes.
It's a funny old world, isn't it? When being proved right puts you in physical danger.
Yes, there are three of us veterans for Europe on this coastline.
Right.
And
I remember talking to you guys.
And we were known because we were wearing the uniform and so on.
Yeah, I do remember. What's the likelihood of people having to move back here?
There are already people moving back to the UK. They tend to be the Leavers.
But through choice as opposed to necessity. I mean, would it be possible to stay if you wanted to, even if you were an ardent?
Absolutely, absolutely, because the Spanish government have been so good. They really have been good. They've given us everything that the Europeans in the UK didn't get, basically. And we didn't ask for it. They've just given it to us. Reassurances of all sorts.
So people are coming back because... because it would be too much for them to swallow the idea that the Spanish government has looked out for them more than the British government has, or what? Yeah,
it's just a simple thing like having to change over to a Spanish driving licence. That just sends people berserk.
Yes, I see.
I don't know why.
Well,
because they're associated.
Well, you do know why. They voted
Swansea, and that's British.
They voted to reduce red tape.
With Madrid.
It's just why they get angry with the wrong people. But that's the conversation we've been having almost since the beginning, doesn't it?
I mean, the red tape here, in my experience, is now, it used to be pretty poor, the bureaucracy in Spain. But in my experience, it's very straightforward and very friendly. And it's easy to get the things that you need to continue life in Spain as a British immigrant.
I wish you well, and I'm glad that you're sort of ploughing a newish furrow. And I'm not going to patronise you, Gareth, but as a general observation to people, threats of physical violence are very bad, obviously. But these are not representative of everybody who voted Leave. Knuckle-dragging racist scumbags are not representative of everybody who voted to Leave, any more than racists in chalk-striped suits are, or racists on Question Time, or racists in newspapers. An awful lot of decent... I know this upsets you, and I don't understand why, because it's just true. You must know people who voted to Leave who are nice people, If Gareth's getting physically threatened in Spain, imagine what it's like for me. Only on social media, not in the real world. You generally find that John 346564322 with the bulldog avatar isn't actually a very big man when it comes to the real world. But that is the point. I spent 4 years saying every racist I know voted for Brexit, but that does not mean that everyone who voted for Brexit is racist. And even the man who's now Foreign Secretary lies and says he thinks everyone that voted for Brexit is racist. They have to lie about people who've pointed out the problems, because the alternative would be to talk about the problems. And that's how we've ended up where we are. It's also how we've ended up, of course, with the astonishing scenario, which is, do you know, when I tied Corbyn and Brexit together, I'm going to put 10 quid in the pot in a minute once I've told you what the charity is. When I tied Corbyn and Brexit together, even I thought I might have pushed it a little bit too far. But all I said that they had in common, there were two things they had in common. Number one, they will never admit they made a mistake, right? And number two, when reality bites, it will be the fault of the people who described reality. It won't be their fault. It won't be the fault of people who thought that Brexit was a brilliant idea and Jeremy Corbyn was the messiah, when Jeremy Corbyn turns out to be the worst Labour leader in living memory and Brexit turns out to be an unmitigated disaster. It will all be the fault of people who accurately described Jeremy Corbyn and Brexit. And this is going to be one of those days where I now get attacked from both extremes of British politics. But if Gareth can walk into a taverna in Spain and deal with the disapproval that he attracts, then I will continue to tell you the truth on this programme, regardless of how many people are continuing to pour lies and bigoted nonsense into your ears. That's my job, okay? That's my job. I give you what you need to make an informed decision. If you ignore the information, you won't make an informed decision. And you'll end up wondering why you've got to apply for a Spanish driving licence while living in Benidorm, or why you're listening to adverts on LBC telling you that you're going to have to fill in customs forms for the first time in 40 years, after, possibly even on this radio station, hearing people tell you that voting for Brexit would reduce red tape. I told you so. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. £10 in the pot for Hospice UK, which is the charity that will receive every penny that I raise by saying those words on air in the context of Brexit, and obviously support them anyway. I've allowed myself one so far. Keith's going to keep a proper tally, and then what day is it today? Tuesday, and then every Friday between now and the end of the year we'll reveal how much I'm going to put in the pot for this particular charity. They essentially send healthcare professionals, they send carers and nurses to the homes of people who are on the home straight, so to speak, of their lives. And I have had personal experience of it over the last few weeks, and I can't talk about it anymore because I will start crying. So thank you. And there's 10 quid in the pot. 4 minutes after 12. Colin is in Belton in Lincolnshire. Colin, what's he doing in Brussels then, mate?
That's a very good question. And I think you started with IDK and then SMH, and now we're going to send Johnson to solve this negotiation.
Yes.
So I think the next acronym to reflect that would probably be LMFAO, because
or WTF.
I know
you're not.
But this is like trying to put out a campfire with kerosene. It's a nonsense. So that can't be the reason. There's no way he is going to be going over there to use his charm and personality with an incredibly bright, articulate lady who knows her onions. So
we went to the LSE, as well. Actually, again, all these reminders of the intertwinedness of our lives and of Europe. That we're set you to continue your pyrotechnics that we are setting fire to. So he does the photo op when saying, "I did my best, folks, but we can't get it over the line because of these pesky foreigners."
Or he does the photo op to say, "We've done it. I've done it. I've somehow managed to make."
So no, I misunderstood you. So you're going for option one, which is he's already rolled over, and he's going to get the photo opportunity and then launch Operation Pretend It's All Gone Brilliantly.
I think maybe somebody's done some numbers on him, and they've said, you know what, the chances are most people are sick of it now. So being very good at U-turns, why don't we have another one?
See, that was I was 52-48 on that at the beginning of the week, or possibly at the end of last week. And when he took over as Prime Minister, bizarre though it sounds, and his fans won't like it, but I thought it increased the chances of a deal, because he would do, as you've just described, U-turn on absolutely anything, whether it's his personal life, his professional life, or his political life. What was true at 10 o'clock in the morning is rarely true by 10 past 10 for Boris Johnson. So that is as close to optimism as we can get, is that he'll lie to anybody. But I look at the noises off, and I think that if he signs up to level playing field, which would obviously be best for Britain, then he might not survive as Prime Minister. And it's
It's true, James, but I mean, the way... look, I'm desperate now. This is hysteria. I'm one of the 3 million. My business works in Europe, and so I'm clinging for any little straw that I can at this point in time. But the other thing I'm doing is fervently kissing my other Irish passport
Oh.
because just in case, I will still be able to have my Irish privilege, which, by the way, I live in gammon Brexit heaven over here, and I think I might just sellotape my Irish passport to my jacket when I'm allowed to go back into the pub again to take the slings and arrows, because it's soon to be Schadenfreude season if it all goes wrong.
It's not, though, is it? Especially not for you. You're not going to take any pleasure in other people feeling and looking stupid, because your business could be... Your business could.
It's just... You know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. I do know what you mean.
But having said that, though, James, I mean, this is the other tragedy of this, and I won't be the only one. I'll move my business to Ireland because I'll have to in order to continue to trade. And by the way, I'm in the services industry, and I keep seeing all those adverts on LBC and elsewhere saying, get ready for Brexit. And it's like, yeah, sure, give me the crystal ball.
I know.
I'll crack on, because that's all you're offering me at the
But
moment.
if you voted to reduce red tape and you listen to the advert talking about customs declarations for the first time in 40 years, how do you lie straight in bed at night, do you think?
Well, that was my father's favourite saying, bless him.
Was it?
And he used to mention this about the certain man, Mr. I met Mr. Johnson a number of years ago.
Yeah, same here. Quite liked him, I've got to be honest.
No, well, you see, I met him, and before I met him, my father, who was slightly left of centre politically, said, if you shake his hand, tell him it's the first time you put your hand in, use expletive all day. And I said, I won't do that, because I'm pretty...
Yes, a man of Anglo-Saxon leanings, your father. I like that. 9 minutes after 12. One of my favourite phrases from that sort of generation was that if brains were dynamite, he'd struggle to blow the wax out of his ears. But here we are. And I think that's probably why I was so clear-eyed about Johnson from the start, was because I fell for it in 2008, was it, when he ran to be mayor? I thought he was going to offer an amnesty to illegal immigrants, people working here in the black economy with no protections and no security at all. It didn't cross my mind that 12 years later he'd be inflicting that upon everyone in the country, wherever they were born. 9 minutes after 12, and Adrian is in Bournemouth. Adrian, what are you... I've forgotten to keep count, actually, but I think it's 1-1. I think we've got one person who thinks it's going to be a rollover, and then he's there for the photo opportunity, and one person who thinks that it's all over bar the shouting, and he's just gone to Brussels so he can pretend that he fought tooth and nail until the end. What do you reckon?
I always base this on what's happening around. And if you look yesterday, they started to reel out IDS again, talking about BMW, and they've got more. Are you
sure? Are you sure?
Yeah, he talked about it yesterday on the news. He said that BMW still hasn't come knocking. I think the deal's done. I've got to be honest. I think it's just about the wording. What's happening is, if you've got two options, we've got fishing, which for some reason the general public are in love with and really, really care about.
Not the general public, just not the general public, but the really brainwashed Brexiters.
Yeah,
and there's lots of them.
There are, and there's lots of them. I've just moved back from Tenerife this week.
Oh yeah,
and you wouldn't believe how many people over there can't get their head around the fact that they're only there because of freedom of movement. Anyway, it's a different point.
No, well, it's the same point Gareth made in Benidorm, isn't it? But there we go. We are they are where they are.
I think there's obviously they're trying to find sort of a landing zone that everybody can sell this to who they need to sell it to. So does he give a little bit of ground on the level playing field, or does he give a little bit of ground on fishing? And I think they've decided which way they're going to go. They're just sort of finalising the wording. The problem that we've got is, I think Barnier has to sell it to 27 other countries, whatever they come up with, and Boris has got to sell it to us. So
he hasn't even got to sell it to us, mate. He's got to sell it to about 50 Tory backbenchers, and that's what worries me, is that it will always be the prioritisation of personal interest with him. How do I stay on as Prime Minister for a bit longer? I better keep these mad people sweet, even though these mad people have led the whole country into this complete lion's den. Does anyone still think it's a good idea? I know they're not. I mean, obviously, my producers furiously vet anybody who's coming on with really clear and powerful arguments of why Brexit is a brilliant idea, because I'm so scared of them. You see, that's why the only people that get on air end up getting insulted by the people who are on their side. But you know, maybe someone could sneak through, pretend to be a Remainer, explain, and then when they get on air, explain to me why Brexit is a brilliant idea. But do you know anyone who still thinks it's going to be a winner? Chicken dinner?
You'll be amazed. I'll give you a very, very brief chat I had with someone in Tenerife last week. This person's lived there for 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. They found themselves unemployed, and they've managed to sign on for the Spanish version of unemployment benefit, right? And a week before that, I was having a conversation with the same person in a bar talking about how unfair it is that people arrive in England and just get houses and benefits given to them. And I sort of looked at her and said, you know that's what you're doing, don't you? She said, it's different. I've worked here.
Right.
That's the mindset that we're trying to deal with.
I don't know if you heard yesterday, but even after all these years, we still stumble across new nuggets of clarity and illumination, is that you sum up the British approach by saying that when we move to another country, we're doing that country a favour. And when people from another country move here, we're doing them a favour.
And there's a brilliant, something you said a minute ago about the Spanish taverna.
Yes.
What do you think Spanish taverna... I've never heard the word Spanish taverna. I've lived in Spain for a long time. What do you think they're actually called in Spain?
I don't know. So I just Greece. Why are you picking on me? I was chatting to my friend Nikos in the coffee shop this morning, so I've got Greece.
No, it's really relevant. In Spain...
Oh, El Pub.
Pub.
Yes.
Yeah, pub.
Yes.
They're called pubs, and the reason they're called pubs...
So we took them
is
out
because that's what we do. We're like a virus. We go over to another country, we infect it, we turn it into Britain, and we leave it again.
There is no vaccine for Brexit, though, unfortunately. 13 minutes after 12. Thank you, Adrian. Remember, I am keen to have fourth options, fifth options. The danger, of course, of trying to argue that things are all going swimmingly and this was all part of the plan is that they're already trying to apportion blame to people for it all having gone so badly. But, hey, since when did logic play a part in the Brexit worldview? It's coming up to 12:15. I suppose if there's a silver lining, then... Well, I don't even know if it is true to say that we'll stop talking about it at some point because, you know, if your house got robbed and people then started pretending that it's what you wanted all along, I don't know that you'd be comfortable with the idea that we all stop pointing out that those people were lying. I'll come to you first after the break, Greg. Can we free up a phone line, please? And Alex, for God's sake, will you stop preventing really clever and articulate pro-Brexit people from getting onto this programme? It's getting out of hand now. It's so transparent. Everybody knows what you're doing. You know, we've got all these actors who've taken off an hour from RADA to ring in and pretend to be Remainers, and all the really, really clever Brexiters can't get through because of all the blinking actors, and then when they're pretending to be Remainers, and then when they do get through, they're so clever that you cut them off immediately. Or so they say on Twitter with their John34656432 account and an avatar of a bulldog. It's 18 minutes after 12. There's room for other options, all right? But I've only got 3 at the moment. And I'm not pretending either, or not pretending, but, you know, performing almost so that I leave some space for you to ring in and give me other options. So either it's all been agreed pretty much, and that will almost certainly involve an attempt to pretend that wins, in quotes, on fish are a price worth paying for huge climb downs on level playing field provisions. We're back to yesterday's stool, aren't we? That's option 1. Why is Boris Johnson going to Brussels? Option 2 is that he is backing himself to deploy previously unsuspected diplomatic and negotiating skills, and he will succeed where his predecessors and his official negotiators have failed and pull something out of the fire that the likes of you and me lack the wit at this point to describe. Or 3, it's all over bar the shouting. It's going to be no deal, which since this whole debacle began has been the only way they can avoid actually describing Brexit. And he just wants to be able to say, well, I did my best, folks, but they wouldn't let me. And Andy makes a great point. Andy Payne has tweeted me that Ursula von der Leyen hasn't been in the job long enough to be demonised by the right-wing media. So, you know, up yours, Delors, do you remember that? The sort of mild racism that has typified almost all right-wing media for as long as I've been alive. Juncker comes in for... Who was supposed to have a drink problem? Was that Juncker? And they were always going on about that. So von der Leyen hasn't been in the job long enough. And coronavirus has been the major cause of concern since she got the big job. So he doesn't have that usual opportunity to turn it into really, really lazy sort of xenophobic rhetoric. Ursula von der Leyen is, as Andy says, a whole different prospect. Johnson must be gutted that Mr. Juncker is no longer the bogeyman he has to deal with to seal the deal or walk away. Politicians are obsessed with optics. That's a good point, actually. But so, look, 2 is a possibility, but I'm going to need a lot of persuasion that the plan really is for Johnson to pull something out of the fire that will keep most people happy. Either it's no deal and he's there so that he can claim he did his best, or it's a thin deal and he's there for the photo opportunity before launching Operation Pretend This Is What You Wanted All Along. That's going to be trickier because it's written down. It's weird. That is the fundamental lack of logic at the heart of this whole conversation that's now been going on for over 4 years, is the fact that if the thing you can write down, it's now two choices. This is Keir Starmer's dilemma, in a way, if there is a deal. There is only that deal and no deal. There is no mythical deal. There is no good deal. There never was a deal that was better than being in. But, you know, the problem... I'm going to put another 10 quid in the pot in a minute, Keith, all right? Just make sure you're paying attention. The problem has always been that if you write it down, it falls apart. The only way you can keep someone like my friends who voted for it, because they kind of had an EFTA, EEA, Norway type hope of things happening. But they are, I mean, one of them lives in Gran Canaria, so the idea that it would be a good idea to end freedom of movement is clearly ridiculous. So to keep them happy and to keep the racists happy was always going to be impossible. How do you keep Farage happy and keep... I'm trying to think of a sensible Brexiter. Well, my friend in Gran Canaria, there you go. And how do you keep them both happy with the... You can't. It's impossible to do. So the thin deal and the rubbish deal is what it comes down to. The no deal, pardon. I lean towards no deal now, for that reason, but that's been my reason all along. The only thing I didn't price into the conversation was obviously the pandemic, because barring an epic catastrophe, Johnson, when he first got the gig, could have done almost anything with a majority of 80. But then, of course, along came the pandemic, and these people that think Brexit is a good idea also think that lockdowns are a bad idea, and they've sort of been thrown more red meat. So he emptied the party of everybody sensible, filled the cabinet with sycophants and yes men. That was why I thought he might actually be able to get a deal through, because he was so powerful as Prime Minister. But then, of course, he got tested by the pandemic and was found to be, I mean, spectacularly, world-beatingly useless, which changes everything. And revivifies the people that John Major used to describe using a well-known B word. So I don't see option 2, and that means either it's a rollover, and then they'll just give Rupert Murdoch and everybody else a ring and get them to pretend that it's not, which will probably work, but the backbenchers won't buy it, or it's a no deal, and he's in Brussels in order to pretend that he did everything he could to pull something out of the fire. 24 after 12 is the time. Greg's in court. Greg, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James. How are you? Firstly, can I just say, do my ambassadorial piece here for Ireland. Your man in Bolton is very welcome to bring his business to Ireland. And he,
he's in Lincoln, I think. He was in Belton in Lincolnshire. But the invitation stands. Carry on.
Well, absolutely. Look, I don't think, look again. I speak very respectfully of your PM because he's your PM. And
you don't have to, mate. You can tell the truth if you want.
I'm going to, I'm not from the country, so, But, look, I think he only cares about being Prime Minister and all of the swagger that goes with it. I don't think, obviously, he's an ideological Brexiteer. Brexit doesn't make sense on any level, but delivering Brexit, if you shout it enough times, looked democratic. So I think that, obviously, delivering something that makes no sense is a huge challenge. So he's brought out this straw man argument in terms of the internal markets bill, and they've, meanwhile, across the entire last few months, there's been a lot of bluster, shouting about fish, taking back control, and all this sort of stuff.
Yes.
But I think he's played chicken a little bit too long. So I definitely don't think a deal is done at this stage. I do not think that this is some choreographed thing that they're going to start shaking hands on the margins of the meeting on Thursday.
I mean, obviously, I hope that is what happens, just for the record, because the stupidest lie of all was the idea that no deal is better than a bad deal. So
we all hope for a deal. There's absolutely no question or doubt about that.
Absolutely.
I think a bad deal would be an unmitigated disaster.
A no deal.
But he needs a big ladder now. He needs a big ladder to climb down from where he is. And I just think he's after really fraying the mood in the halls of power across Europe. And I'm just not sure that what he has to offer will be enough because things have become a little entrenched. But certainly, I think he's going to burn the internal markets bill as that's absolute cornerstone of what has to happen. If the internal markets bill stands, then you're absolutely it's going to be a no deal. So that's going to go. But I definitely don't think a deal is done at this stage. To answer your question, I think that
it's going to be. So he's going to say, "I did my best, folks," and it's all their fault that we can't.
No, I think he'll have to give some ground. I think he'll definitely have to give some ground, and hopefully the ground that he gives will be enough for the European side.
Okay. So option one is getting more support than option three. Option three is that it's all over, bar the shouting, and he's just there to pass the buck. Option one is that he's going to roll over, and he's there for the photo opportunity and the launch of Operation. Don't believe what your eyes and ears tell you. Believe what I tell you.
Yes, I do believe this is about the optics for the home audience. Absolutely.
All right, you're on. Do you know? So I know you weren't. I know you're in Ireland. I should probably ask a caller in Britain this question. Are you aware of? I've got a tweet here, and it's one of those weirdly aggressive ones that I always find hilarious. Have you nothing to say about Kay Burley, or are you on a gagging order as well? Asks Mick. Are you aware of Kay Burley having done anything interesting in the last sort of 24 hours or so?
Geez, talk about putting me on the spot. I haven't. I'll be honest. James,
well, you must be part of the gagging order and the conspiracy then, Greg. Obviously.
No.
All right. Well, I'll check during the news. I'll find out what she's been up to, and then decide whether or not I'm going to obey the gagging order that I am currently obviously obeying, while, like Greg, pretending to be completely in the dark. My God, you can tell. I could be wrong, Mick. Where is it? But I'm going to go out on a limb here, mate, and say that you're a bit of a Brexiter, because there's something about the aggressive tone of your tweet and the way that you've persuaded yourself of something that is absolute Horlicks that just suggests to me which box you ticked back in June 2016. If I'm wrong, I will put another tenner in the pot for Hospice UK, a charity doing absolutely incredible work. Should we catch up with Theo Usherwood? Should we summon him? Are we going to summon Theo Usherwood? We haven't summoned Theo Usherwood for a while. Maybe he'll know. He keeps his ear very close to the ground on such matters. It's coming up to 29 minutes after 12, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I will squeeze in one more call, I think, before the headlines, not least to free up a phone line for people who I've got really brilliant arguments about Brexit but aren't allowed on because they're deliberately kept off this programme by an incredibly complicated and comprehensive vetting process. So if you ring in and say, I'd just like to tell James how much I like his new book, right, we can put you straight through, and then you can make all the brilliant points in favour of Brexit that I'm too frightened to listen to ordinarily. And I got a feeling our friend here talking about Kay Burley and gagging orders probably fits into that category. So go on, mate, give us a buzz. Patrick's in Foon I haven't got time now, too much waffling. I'll come to you first after the break, our Danish correspondent. Phone lines are open, 0345 6060973 is the number that you need, and the question is a simple one. What do you think he's going to do in Brussels? Roll over and try and pass it off as a victory, enlisting all of the usual suspects in the right-wing media to pretend that this is a great idea, or acknowledge no deal and immediately launch the blame game, which is quite remarkable for someone who was actually the head of Vote Leave and has seen pretty much every single promise made by that organisation disappear down the plug hole of reality. But I kind of would suggest that history points us towards that conclusion. I hope not, but the fact lot of good that's done me so far. It's 12:30, and Lucinda Horsley has your headlines. Summon the Usherwood. Breaking news.
There is no breaking news. Well, no, James.
Unsummon the Usherwood. Just do it in rewind, Keith. You're too slow, mate. You're supposed to be a DJ. Carry on.
To bring you up to date, we are no further down the line with these Brexit negotiations. Michel Barnier has said that Brexit is not just a school in patience, it's a university in patience. His talks are continuing with Lord David Frost. Of course, he's the chief negotiator for the Britain side in those talks. But we have learned a bit more about the process that's taking place when Boris Johnson goes to Brussels later this week, possibly as early as tomorrow. that isn't going to be, this is what the European Union is saying, this isn't going to be a negotiation with the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. What it's going to be is about trying to find a break, trying to give their respective negotiating teams the mandate to break with the current deadlock. So at the moment, they're arguing over fish, they're arguing over governance, they're arguing over level playing field. Neither side has the ability to give ground which would find a way through it, and therefore that's the purpose of the meeting. So when they come together to try and say, well, actually, you now have the authority, we've reached an agreement, you now have the authority to give some ground on this, and perhaps Ursula von der Leyen might say, well, we're prepared to compromise in this aspect, and that a deal could be found that way around. But at the moment, there's no news.
There is. You've missed it. Huge story breaking.
Oh, with the vaccine story?
No.
So,
absolutely huge. The German car industry have turned up.
Have they?
Yes.
And what have they said? Sorry.
Volkswagen has said, we won't pass on post-Brexit tariffs to British customers when they order new Volkswagens before New Year's Eve 2020.
So afterwards...
Not quite what they were supposed to do, is it? According to Digby Pudding-Jones, weren't they supposed to wade in and insist that we can have all of the benefits of membership without any of the responsibilities?
The argument wasn't it, from Brexiters that they were going to turn up and say to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and other European leaders, hold your horses, we have to do a deal, we have to concede to British demands, because if we don't...
But all they've said is order it before the end of the year and you won't have to pay the tariffs that you will have to pay next year.
Yes.
And that's with or without a deal.
Well, it depends on exactly the terms of the deal, doesn't it, as to what tariffs apply.
Yeah.
If there's no deal, if it's an Australia-style arrangement, solution, as Boris Johnson described it this morning at Guy's Hospital, then...
Again, is he still punting that?
Yes.
Australia style.
Solution now.
Solution. Which means no deal whatsoever. And why mention Australia, which has loads of trade agreements with all manner of territories, and which also, of course, is very keen to get a trade agreement signed with the European Union.
Bears, Christmas on the beach.
English-speaking white people.
It's a cuddlier.
And there's this perception, which is almost as dumb as Brexit itself, that Australians' point-based immigration policy is something that could be relevant in the United Kingdom. So that got good results in focus groups. So if Australian-style immigration policy gets good feedback from thick racists, then an Australian-style trade deal could also, even though it makes even less sense than the immigration point, if it goes down well with the thick racists, Johnson's all right for another day. I won't put you on the spot, Theo, but are you aware of why Kay Burley is why I am not talking about Kay Burley today?
You did talk about Kay Burley.
Yeah, but there's still a gagging order in place about a story I'm not aware of. Are you aware of what the story is?
I am aware of what the story is.
Can you tell us, or would that be embarrassing to you as another world-famous broadcaster?
I'm not going to... I'm just going to tell you what the story is.
You're going to break the gagging order that
there was never a gagging order.
No, I'm reading tweets.
Oh, right.
Mick says there is a gagging order. There is a gagging order.
The story is that Kay Burley went to...
This is the Sky News presenter.
Went to two restaurants in London to celebrate her 60th birthday with up to 10 colleagues. And then she went home...
she's broken the rule of 6? Or would that be okay as a business?
I think it's difficult to pass one's 60th birthday as a business meeting.
Yeah,
and then invited 3 other colleagues back for a sort of after party at her home.
And this is going to sound like a meh question, but it isn't. I'm going to say who cares, knowing that people do, not suggesting that they shouldn't. So, and who cares?
Twitter cares.
Right.
Social media cares. I mean, I think it's a fairly big story on social media. The argument is that it's difficult for...
Was she hard on Cummings when he went to Barnard Castle?
Yes. So the problem is that...
So the forelock tugger.
I
also care. I mean,
I don't know if Kay Burley was specifically... Let me just roll back on that. I don't know if Kay Burley was...
But why would I be observing a gagging order? I've got a feeling Mick's not going to ring in.
I don't think you are.
He won't get past the vetting process.
But it's difficult. The argument is that it's difficult to
hold politicians to account if you've broken it yourself.
Yes.
Seems reasonable. Actually, and will Sky take steps? Do we know about this?
Sky have already taken steps. They've launched an internal investigation, and Kay Burley was due to present her show this morning, but there was another presenter was drafted in to present the show.
Curious and
It
curious.
was due to be at the hospital, I understand.
And then, of course, we can't talk about the bits that are under the gagging order.
Well, so what, you have systematic gagging order?
Yeah.
So
You're suggesting these people aren't completely honest, truthful and intelligent when they say there's a gagging order about Kay Burley's breach of coronavirus, that's why no one's talking about it, as opposed to people just not being that interested or aware of it? Oh, my God. It's on the BBC now, Theo.
the story's on the BBC?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you thought the gagging order was on the
No. I mean, do the BBC not know about the gagging order? You'd think someone would have told. It's probably all part of the plan to bring down the BBC, isn't it? Here we go. Sky News presenter apologises for COVID breach. Sky News presenter Kay Burley has apologised for an error of judgment, in quotes, after she, again in quotes, inadvertently broke the rules. That'll be an interesting one to examine. Around COVID-19 safety. Posting on Twitter, the journalist said she had been celebrating her 60th birthday at a COVID-compliant restaurant on Saturday. Do we know what Matt Hancock is doing in the House of Commons?
He's answering an urgent question in the House of Commons. And he will be obviously paying tribute to the MHRA, who approved the vaccine, which the first, Margaret Keenan was the first person in the world to receive the vaccine.
Apparently, she's just been arrested in an Apple shop, smashing up iPads and MacBooks, because she's under the control of Bill Gates now. No, is that not true either? Oh, God, there really is a gagging order on that one. So she's been injected with the vaccine and therefore the nano chip. And the 90-year-old Northern Irish woman from Coventry was last seen smashing up MacBooks and iPads in a branch of the Apple store because she is now under the control of Bill Gates.
I think the last time I saw her was giving an interview where she urged other people to get the vaccine.
Yeah, well, that's just Bill Gates trying to get more people infected with the chip so he can get them all into Apple product outlets to smash up all the kit and caboodle, isn't it? Do keep up. Theo Washwood, many thanks indeed. That was a joke, by the way. The lady has not been arrested in any way, shape or form, and neither has she been taken over by Bill Gates and therefore by a process of remote control directed into an Apple shop where she proceeded to smash up MacBooks and laptops. In Brexit Britain, I think you need to explain that that's a joke. Although Mick probably thinks it's true. Marty's in Belfast. Marty, what have you got?
James, what about you? Hope you're well.
I'm grand. Every caller from your part of the world asks me how I am, and I say I'm grand. I never use that word in any other context, you know, but as soon as I hear the accent, I'm grand, so I am. Carry on, Marty. It's ridiculous.
I know Theo sort of burst my bubble with his explanation as to why Boris Johnson is going to Brussels. I was of the view that he's going to go there and come back with without a deal and WTO terms. And the reason I was thinking that is he knows he can't get a deal without caving on the Tory hardliners' red lines.
Yes.
If he does, he's toast as far as PM goes. And I don't think his ego would let him countenance that.
So he'd rather hang on and watch the country suffer even more unnecessary damage than do what's best for the country and compromise his own position.
Well, you may well say that, but he'll be all sunny uplands.
Sunlit. Get it right, will you, Marty? Sunlit uplands.
Sorry, I do apologise. But I do have a much bigger concern about the WTO. And if that's what we end up with, I can see that breaking up the UK with Northern Ireland going first. James, I'm even older than you. I'm 56.
Holy moly.
I know it's terrible. Our daughter's generation, our one daughter is 26, the other is 23. They love the flexibility of the freedom of movement and being able to go all. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just unbelievable, isn't it? Why on earth?
You know, it's only obviously anecdotal, but
of course,
all of the grown-up kids of our friends want to be back in the EU, and they know that we can do it by becoming a united Ireland.
Well, do you know, it was a tongue-in-cheek contribution to the programme, but it was a long time ago, and obviously the Scottish equivalent is a slightly more, or a considerably more complicated question. But when I was talking about tangible benefits, and obviously desperate, despite the very careful vetting process, desperate to get people on the programme to actually explain positives and benefits, with the caveat that I'd actually insist that they explained it rather than just stated untrue things and then ran away. It was calls from Ireland said, I'm really pleased with it because I think it will make a united Ireland happen in my lifetime. And at the time, you take it with a small pinch of salt. But these days, it's very hard to see how else things are going to shake down over the next couple of decades, isn't it?
Well, there is a really, really big sea change occurring here at the minute with the younger generation. And in the not too distant future, the next 5, 6, 7 years maybe, I can see there being a border poll, unlike Scotland, where they've already had the referendum. If the evidence here shows that there is a likely majority for a united Ireland, the Secretary of State is bound by law to hold the referendum.
So we've already created a free market area that is smaller than the United Kingdom, and that opens the door to the possible end of the United Kingdom.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it happening in my lifetime.
Take back control, Marty? Take back that control. So much control. At least the German car industry have finally turned up, eh? Better late than never.
I know. But it will be sad from the fact that if we end up with a united Ireland, it won't be, I don't think, because the vast majority of people want a united Ireland per se. It'll be to get back into the EU.
Same with Scotland, although as we both said, it's a much more complicated process and a much more difficult issue. 12:47 is the time. I nicked that joke about Margaret Keenan and the Apple Store off Michael Holt, but I don't want to upset you, Michael, but if you came up with that yourself rather than having nicked it off someone else on social media, it's time you hung up the snooker cue, hitman, and got yourself into stand-up comedy, seriously, because I've seen. But that's who I saw. That's where I saw it first. So to give credit where it's due, Michael drew that gag to my attention. And I tell you what, the response to the Kay Burley story is mostly an expression of surprise that she is 60. So given that she's having quite a tough time at the moment, I'm happy to pass that on to her. People can't actually believe that you're 60, Kay, myself included. So happy birthday, but that was a very silly thing to do, as I realise you have fully appreciated and acknowledged. It's 12:48. Going to do a show soon on really stupid texts and tweets because we vet the phone so completely that these people can't get on because we vet it, and these geniuses aren't allowed on in case they embarrass me or make me look stupid. So this one, understandably unsigned. Is James advocating breaking the rules around COVID and suggesting we go out with as many people as we like where we like? Remember, this person not only is allowed to use scissors, but also has been listening to the same radio programme that you've been listening to. Unless it's one of the people that listens to it but doesn't listen to it, because they're quite well represented on social media as well. And I'm going to actually, I had a bit of fun today. I'd take Patrick's call and then I need to tell you something. All right, so Patrick, what would you like to say?
So, James, how are you?
I'm all right, mate. What's going on? What's
you didn't
Johnson?
say you were feeling grand.
No, well, you're not Irish. I don't know what the Danish equivalent is, but I don't do it with Australians. I don't say good day to Australians, but if an Irish person says to me, how are you, James? I say, oh, I'm grand, I am. It's ridiculous. And do you know, if you go to Ireland and you're on Gmail, it changes. Your automatic replies change to it's grand. So at the moment, if you're on my Gmail in London, you get the automatic reply suggestions, and it'll be something like, yes, that's great. And in Ireland, when I was there for the book festival in Dorky a couple of years ago, it changed overnight to, that's grand. Anyway, carry on, Patrick. What do you want to say if you can remember?
Yeah, my theory is that actually we know that Mr. Johnson is prone to believing the last person he spoke to.
Yes.
And I think someone has put an idea into his head. Forget Operation Red Tape. It's Operation Red Cape. He's going to go over there and save the world. So he's going to agree to some things, but maybe slightly change them. So, for example, the customs union will stay in place, but we'll call it something else.
We beat you to it. We called it the Union of Customs about 3.5 years ago. Go on.
So then, if you do that, of course, the Good Friday Agreement, the Irish problem, goes away.
Yes.
The Farage garages won't be needed anymore. So the trade can continue.
Yeah, but, mate, freedom of movement continues as well.
Maybe you'd call it something else. Freedom of travel.
No, he can't do that, unfortunately. I wish you were right, but I mean, this is why a lot of the debates about who's to blame for this thing that is still going to be brilliant are so hilarious, because freedom of movement, immigration, without it, there'd be no Brexit. And yet, of course, that is the point. That is the altar upon which Theresa May had no choice but to sacrifice single market and customs union membership.
Do you think that the internal market bill was put there as a bargaining chip to be used later?
I think it was the plan, but it was incredibly stupid to say. It literally was saying, if you don't do what we want, we'll announce to the world that we will break international law and go back on promises we made less than a year ago. I mean, as blackmail goes, it's not exactly photos of you with Dirty Gertie from Number 30, is it, Patrick?
No,
in an intimate clinch. If you don't do what we want, we will break international law and announce to the world that if they sign a contract with us in January, we will go back on it before the end of the year. That'll teach you.
One thing I do think, though, James, I think the fish are going to be put under a bus or thrown under a bus.
Just mix it. Well, who knows? I mean, it might be all we got left. If we come out with no deal, then, we're back to coastal waters and WTO, which, in a way, would be good news for all the Spanish companies that own huge swathes of the British fishing fleet and all the Filipino fishermen that work on them. And, of course, the big businesses that own them. I think the biggest being the one that sponsored the boat that Farage rode up the Thames a few years ago. 12:56 is the time. All right, I'm having a lot of fun at the moment. And I just want to say something, because I know that obviously you're not ringing me, which is fine. And we don't vet people. I know nobody actually needs this explaining. And you are still sending me quite rude texts and tweets, which again is fine. I get very well looked after here, and I've got very broad shoulders. But I do worry about you. Okay, and we are now moving into the bit where ordinary people, as opposed to people in my profession who get paid for it, or people in politics who get high on it, that they are going to be proved, or if not already, categorically and comprehensively wrong. And for your mental health, you now face a really important choice. You either continue clinging on to this fury and this almost incoherent anger, and it will continue to hurt you, and not just hurt you, it will hurt the people around you. And it's such a simple choice to just surrender it. Nobody is going to hold you responsible for your Brexit vote for the rest of your life. I will make sure of that in my little contribution to public discourse in this country. The people who led you to this place are the people who will be held responsible. The people who were led there will not be. It is still a miracle to me, having really dug into it, that Remain got as much as 48%. Simply counting the amount of newspaper articles written over 30 years in newspapers owned by Rupert Murdoch and the Barclay brothers and all the rest of them. There is no shame in this at all, but the anger will hurt you. And more importantly, perhaps, it will hurt the people around you. And you can... I mean, it's not as easy as flicking your fingers, but it's not far off. You can just let it go. Why am I so angry? That's all you need to ask yourself. And then answer it honestly. And you'll probably find out that the anger you feel is not directed at the people you currently think it is directed at. And if you're up to it, ask yourself this. Ask yourself, what am I so frightened of? It's not Romanian plasterers, is it? Or Polish doctors. What am I so frightened of? And again, you'll probably feel better for it. And then finally ask yourself this. Where does my power lie? What can I actually do about this situation I find myself in, which is so enraging? And you'll probably conclude that spending your time shouting at people, or losing your temper, or tweeting or texting or Facebooking vile stuff is not making you feel better, or anybody else around you. So I've got 3 words for you. We began the programme with 3 words today. I don't know. Crucial words that I will continue to revere for as long as I have this microphone in front of me. But I'm going to leave you with 3 more words, all right? Let it go. Just let it go. And you'll feel so much better. Time for me to go. Here's Sheila Fogarty.